I'm Andy Erwin, and this is the Storytellers. Coming up on today's episode of the Storytellers, this guy is one of my heroes, and he's one of the titans of kind of faith in mainstream film and media. I think he's just represented himself in so many ways, whether it's as a producer, as a best-selling author, as a speaker, as a personality online that people are seeing, like on television, different things like that, and now as an actor. So this guy has had a huge impact on our career over the years on multiple fronts. So you know him from his films like Miracles from Heaven, and in movies like Flaming Hot. You also know him as an actor from both Woodlawn and most recently Jesus Revolution. Would you please welcome my good friend, DeVon Franklin. Today's a big day. We've got DeVon Franklin on the show, the Storytellers. Welcome to Storytellers, my friend.
Oh, my brother, thank you for having me, man. Honored to be here.
Man, you've always been the one to chase for us. When we first got started, I know, we're only like about five months apart in age, but I've always kind of looked up to you because like when we were getting started, you were a vice president at Columbia Pictures, and we would always, there was a couple of times where we come on the lot, and I just remember stepping into your office, like I was sweating profusely. I was so nervous. I remember I was talking to my brother John on the outside the door, and I'm like, "This is the big time. Like we're stepping into DeVon Franklin's office," and like that was a big moment for us. And you were always like super kind and kind of shared like good advice. And we were, kind of still green and trying to get our feet under us. What was it like being on the other side of the desk, when you were like an executive at the studio and having these filmmakers come in like that?
I really had an open door policy.
Yeah.
I think Sony probably would have been upset if they knew how many of these meetings that I took, but I felt like, I was in that position for a reason. And so, I was grateful, especially to meet you all. 'Cause I think at that point in time, you all had done October Baby.
Yeah. We just done the first movie. That was about
Yeah,
it.
had done the first movie, and I think I think you had even like a sizzle for Woodlawn or something like
we
that.
had shot a sizzle, and we came in and showed you, and you had like a lot of really good pointers on like kind of the story that we needed to tell.
Yeah.
And so we showed you the sizzle, and then like you're like, okay, you got some work to do. It's good. It's good, but what story are you really wanting to tell? And we're like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So
So,
so being on the other side of the desk it was great. And I just remember, you and John just, always just being such visionaries. And even though I may have had notes on, the Woodlawn Sizzle, I mean, the quality of it was phenomenal. And it just spoke to the quality of you all as filmmakers and writers and storytellers. So for me, it was a joy to be able to have the conversations that we have and to be able to, didn't even realize then the type of relationship we would ultimately be starting, a brotherhood that we started in that moment. So I was grateful.
yeah, the thing I love about you is, I mean, you're a communicator. So you know, you're a producer. You're now an actor. You're an author. You're a speaker. But at the heart of it, you're a communicator, and it kind of that started with you as like as a preacher. Like you preached your first sermon when you were like what, 15?
15 years old. Yeah, yeah. At
Man.
Winds of Love Maranatha Ministries in Oakland, California, on 70th and MacArthur in Oakland, in East Oakland, California, which is, a pretty rough neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that's where my uncle planted the church. And when I was 15, it was the second youth day that the church had done, because the church started when I was 9. But the youth program didn't really start until years later. And so for the first youth day, my older brother, Ray, he preached.
Right.
And then so because I was the next in line, they came to me and said, okay, we're doing youth day and we want you to preach. And so I was like, okay. And, at that time, I was reading the book, Live Your Dreams by the legendary Les Brown, who is just one of the greatest motivational speakers to ever do it. And
Yeah.
I remember, like using the Bible and using his book as the foundation for that first sermon. And, I did it. And the response was beyond anything I could have imagined.
Hmm.
And everybody was like, wow, you need to preach and you need to go into ministry. And I was like, listen, I'm going into movies. That's what I'm going to do. And they were like, you could run, but you can't hide. I said, well, listen, I'm running real fast. So,
Well, with that, like, you knowing so clearly that God had called you to entertainment, like, you're like, I can preach, but I'm called to entertainment. But when you started sharing this idea that you have this dream, was there any nervousness in the church that, hey, this is where you're wanting to go? It's like, it's kind of a little bit of the devil's playground type thing, or was it like, did they get what you were trying to do?
it was a lot of, the Devil's Playground and Sodom and Gomorrah and Are You Sure? And yeah, I mean, there were some that were supportive, but in general, I think people were very hesitant. Like, okay, are you going to lose your faith? Are you really going to be able to do this? And so for me, I was always going back to why I was so passionate about entertainment. I just remember, my father died when I was 9 years old of a
Yeah.
heart attack when he was 36.
Wow.
And the majority of my life, most of my memories of him are when he was inebriated. He was an alcoholic for most of my life until the very end. Right before he passed away, he got sober. And so, coming out of that same year that my father died was the year that my uncle started Wings of Love.
Right.
And so it was an interesting combination of ministry and then also watching movies and
Yeah.
television shows that kind of became therapy to a degree. So, movies like Rocky and Back to the Future and
Yeah.
The Color Purple, these were, films. I mean, TV shows like The Cosby Show, A Different World. These were shows that I just really connected to. And
Yeah.
so at that age, I just got really curious about like, okay, well, who's making these movies? Where does it come from? How does Hollywood work? Whenever we would come to LA, I would say, "Oh, I always wanted to go to Universal Studios to take the
Mhm.
tour."
Yeah.
And so it was always just one of those things that I just said, "Wow, I just am passionate about entertainment." The lights, camera, action, that just
Yeah.
felt like, "Oh no, that's where I'm supposed to be. I got to go try that." So it was really just following what I felt,
Hmm.
and me feeling that way had a lot to do with the role that entertainment played in helping me navigate the death of my father.
It can be a little bit paralyzing at first when you're just like, okay, where do I even start? Like, especially when you're outside of the industry, like when you're coming from the Bay Area in a rough neighborhood and you're trying to figure out like, where do I even start? We felt a little bit of that coming from Birmingham, Alabama, where it's just like we would tell people our dreams and that we wanted to make movies, and people were like, yeah, that's cute, but like, what are you really going to do to earn a
Yeah,
living?
get a real job.
Yeah, get a real job. And I'd be like, yeah, no, it's where did you even start? So did you just to start decide like film school, that idea with USC, or what was your goal?
Yeah, well, I've always, when I'm passionate about something, I always, do the research
Right.
and immerse myself in whatever I'm passionate about to better understand it. And so I was a student of entertainment and student of the business. And so, I knew like, oh, okay, if I really want to do this, I need to be in LA. I knew
Yeah.
that. And then for me to be in LA, I was like, I need to go to college in LA. Okay, great. And then at that time, and I think even to this day, the USC Film School is the best film school on the planet. And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, I need to get into USC Film School. So I was like, oh, well, I like business. So why don't I do a business major, a film minor?
Yeah.
And then because I had done the research on the business, I knew that I needed an internship. I knew
Mm.
that I needed to get real life experience in the business. I
Yeah.
couldn't just rely on USC to teach me something theoretical,
Mhm.
about business or about entertainment. I needed a practical experience. And the beauty of that is that when in my freshman sophomore year, I played basketball
Hmm.
for my high school team. And then between sophomore and junior year, my aunt bought me a car. And the stipulation for me getting the car was I had to pay for my car insurance. So in order for me to pay for my car insurance, I had to get an after school job. So I stopped playing basketball my junior and senior year, and I took an after school job at a nonprofit organization in downtown Oakland. Now, cut to me being at USC freshman year
Mhm.
looking for an internship. The executive director of that nonprofit was college roommates with the writer who wrote Set It Off.
Man.
Yeah, and so Set It Off was like a really big
Yeah.
movie, around that time. And so, I went in, met with that writer. He's the one that said, "Hey, you should get an internship at this company called Handprint Entertainment. They manage Will Smith, they manage Babyface, they manage, Michelle and Cello." So I went in, interviewed with them. They gave me the internship, and so I did that freshman year. I did a full, class load. I did a work study job at the
Man.
USC Hillel Jewish Center, and I did my internship. And that a combination of those things became what I did in part throughout my entire college career.
Well, you look at something like that, and the cool thing is, it's like, a lot of times when we feel like, our plans, the door closes, and you look back at it and you look at the right door that God was directing you to, uh, it's like I'm always thankful, like, oh my, if I'd gone the way I wanted, like
Yeah,
this and this wouldn't have happened.
that's right.
You end up at this company that represents Will Smith.
See, growing up, I was a huge Fresh Prince fan. Not,
Sure.
I mean, of the TV show, that was fine. I mean, I would watch it here and there, but I was a fan of him as a rapper.
Right.
And for DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh
Yep.
Prince, and they had an album at the time. He's the DJ, I'm the rapper, and I
Yep.
remember, and I would listen to that. And on that album, there was a song that was like about Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger. And they had done a video to that song, and
Yep.
then New Line came out and said, "You can't release this video because you don't have any rights to do this."
Mhm.
So I remember once I got a chance to meet him, I asked him about the video.
Hmm.
And I asked him about that experience. And so he gave me his point of view and why they had to, shelve it and all that kind of stuff. And that began our relationship.
Wow.
And the other part that that started the relationship was when I came into that internship my first day, they gave me no assignment. So they literally like put me up in the file room in the back. And so I was like, man, I better figure something out. So I just started, saying, all right, well, let me revamp these files. The filing system is a mess. Let me go to the assistants and ask them what they need filed. What do you need faxed? And so I just started making myself useful and looking for ways to be of service. And that is something that got on Will's radar, like, oh, wow, who's this intern? And, I keep hearing all these things about this intern that's really great. And so, it was the service and the curiosity that really allowed me to build a relationship with him. And then I was an assistant. I was an intern freshman and sophomore year. My junior year, Will and his then manager, James Lassiter, started a company called Overbrook Entertainment.
Yeah.
They had a deal with Universal Pictures at the time. I became their first intern. And then I interned my senior year. And then when I graduated, I became the assistant to Will Smith's manager and his producing partner, James Lassiter.
That's fascinating. Just all the steps there. And I just think, there's something to be said about just having the discipline instead of going for, hey, what are you going to do for me? Having that service mindset that's relationship driven. Like, it's a lost art form. Like, people that they go for the relationship first, eventually there is a moment in time where that becomes beneficial to yourself. But that idea of being service minded, of what does this other person need first, it's just a lost art form. Like,
Absolutely.
that's fantastic.
It
You're like,
really is, man. And also it's lost in this generation.
yeah,
It's becoming lost because in my experience, a lot of times, people want something, they want to
Yep.
harvest from a field they haven't planted in.
Yep.
And they want people to put them on or give them opportunities that for me, no one gave me anything. I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to show what I could do. And once I showed what I could do through the mindset of service, that's when more opportunities were given. But nobody like just gave me an opportunity because it's like, oh, you're divine. Like, no, it's like your work, your service, your heart of service, your contribution, your selflessness, even at 18, 19 years old, because I learned that from the church. I learned that from my uncle. That was essential. And I think that
Yep.
in this day and age, if people are looking to be successful, it all starts with service.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, whatever your situation is, at the end of the day, there's no one on this planet that has a job in some way and is not in service to someone.
Yep.
The president of the United States is in service to the American people. Elon Musk is in
Yep.
service to his shareholders. Everyone's in service, and the better quality of service that we provide, I think, directly correlates to the impact that we can have.
Totally. And I think also the idea that as a filmmaker, you're in service to your audience.
That's
You
right.
know, so the filmmakers that they go out and they just do something indulgent just for themselves, you have a very limited window of success unless they consider like who's my audience and who
That's
am I
right.
here to serve? What do they want to see? How do I make sure they have a great experience? So the filmmakers that have a lasting shelf life are the ones that they really see it as a service oriented job, not an indulgent art form, I think. And
Absolutely.
so I think that's with once you started working at Overbrook and started spending time around Will, what are some of the things that you learned? Like, I've always respected Will's work ethic. Like,
Yeah.
he very easily could have coasted as the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and just been like, I'm a sitcom star and had his moment in the sun. But he was working his butt off to become a movie star while he was that. And then he worked his butt off to become a producer. Like, what are some of the things you learned in proximity to Will and during those years at Overbrook?
Yeah, I learned a lot. I mean, one of the things that he would talk about, because I also remember my senior year at USC. Even though I was a business major, I was in entrepreneurship. It was an emphasis in entrepreneurship.
Right.
And as part of that, program, I had to do, a report on an aspect of entertainment that I was really passionate about. And so I chose Will and got a chance to interview him for that project. And, one of the things that I remember him telling me is that, it's not about necessarily how hard you work. Everybody, can work hard for a moment. It's about how long can you work, and he was like, so often people, can work hard, but then they fatigue. But can you stay committed? Can you, run the course? Can you stay the course? The other thing that he would teach me is that, you know, when it came to relationships and it came to entertainment, so often with entertainment or people, we're looking like, okay, how can I make it quickly? And his thing was like, take your time, be
Mm.
patient. And then he also said, that last distance, let's say wherever it is you're trying to get or whatever you're trying to be in that moment. He said, that last distance is always the hardest, and
Wow.
it's excruciating, and it's going to require everything in you to be able to do it. And also the other thing about Will, beyond just verbally the things that he shared with me, just being around him and being able to soak up so much from him.
Yeah.
A lot of what I took from him was like really being an ambassador of hope and goodwill,
Hmm.
because that's really what he was and that's who he still is.
Yeah.
And just the way that he would, even being in the office, see, I would see him in the office. I mean, I would see him in ways that nobody else would see him.
Hmm.
And, he was always, positive, always, joking, always, the life of the party, always had something positive to say, always had a listening, would lend his ear to hear
Yeah.
what others may need. And so I took that. I was like, oh, wow, be an ambassador of hope, be an ambassador of goodwill, facilitate meaningful experiences with people, look people in the eye, give them a moment, say hello, like all that stuff is stuff that I gleaned from him, in addition to the things that he shared with me verbally.
I always love getting in proximity to somebody like that has done the work and then just kind of gleaning just kind of those character traits that drive them and trying to understand not what they do but how they think.
That's right.
That's always super fascinating. For you, like, you spent time at Overbrook, and then I had read that there was a period of time in the early 2000s where you almost were about ready to hang it up. uh,
Hmm.
that you came to a place of almost saying maybe this isn't going to work out. What was that moment for you? Like that kind of dark night of the soul of like, I don't know if this is going to happen for me. I've been around it, but as far as finding my voice, what was that moment for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. So for me, that moment was that was in 2002. if I remember correctly, it was 2002. Yes.
Yeah.
So I, at that point in time, had been, that was 2002. Wow. Yeah, I had been with, you know, Will and that whole, camp for 6 years almost.
Wow.
4 years as an intern, and then going on my second year as an assistant. And when I took the job as James Lasseter's assistant, I was promised that within a year I would get promoted to become a junior executive in the film department because I was already doing that kind of work.
Sure.
And they were like, "Look, why don't you just be this assistant, for a year, and then we'll promote you?" And I was like, "Great." So, a year came and went, and that didn't happen for a variety of reasons. And one day, they ended up letting go of the entire film department. There were about three
Wow.
executives, let them all go, including their support staff. And they brought in one executive who was more senior, who had an assistant, and that executive ran the film department. And then I pretty much knew once they made that level of a change, I knew that I wasn't probably going to get the promotion that I was promised.
Yeah.
So, after months and months and months of not getting the promotion, at that time, because I was so focused on entertainment and I put so much into this business and all the sacrifices while I was in college, a lot of times I wouldn't go party because I was working,
Yeah.
I would be working late at the internship. Sometimes I'd be at the internship till 12, 1 o'clock in the morning,
Wow.
just working, putting in the time.
Dude.
And I wouldn't go out, I wouldn't hang out, I wouldn't go to a lot of the college games. So I felt like I had sacrificed so much for this position. And so when it dawned on me that this was not going to happen, I started to lose hope. I started to lose faith because I could only see my future through the lens of that opportunity being the promotion. So after months and months and months of me not knowing what to do about that, I really in that period of time I was upset because I was like, man, I've given up all of this for this career, and now it looks like it's pretty much at a dead end because I'm like, look, I've been an assistant, I am an assistant, but I can't be an assistant for the rest of my life. I've got to be able to move forward if I'm going to make it in this business. So after months of coming in the office depressed, there was one day I just got fed up. I just was like, man, I'm tired of this. I came in, turned on my computer, and I was like, you know what? I can't do it. So I went to the bathroom, and I went to the stall, and went in the stall, shut the door, and then me and God had it out. I was like, look, you said that you would, open up the windows of heaven and pour me out a blessing. You also said that anything I asked for in the name of Jesus that you would do. So I said, in the name of Jesus, Lord, you must move on this job today.
Wow.
So I left the bathroom later on that night. It was just me and my boss that were there. And my boss called me in his office and he was like, listen, Will and I, we love you. We wish we could promote you, but we can't. So we want to help you find a new job.
Wow.
So at first I was like, oh, wow, this is great. Prayer worked. But then I was like, wait a minute, they want to help me find a new job. What? Like that means my job is not going to be mine much longer. So I was grateful that God heard my prayer, but I was also now anxious because I'm like, okay, wait, I got to hurry up and find a job. So I'm, made list after list and interview after interview. He sent out emails, resume, all that. Nothing happened. I went to Will and said, Will, can you give me a meeting with your agents? I sat down with his agents at CAA. Richard Lovin at the time, Ken Stovitz, and they were like, okay, great, we'll get behind you. They set some meetings for me, no job. And it wasn't until I heard this message from TD Jakes called Turn the Page. And he talked about how at the end of Deuteronomy, Moses died and the Israelites were mourning. But when you turn the page to Joshua, God tells, Joshua, hey, and the Israelites, your mourning time is up. It's time to get up and go into the promised land. And he equated that with life.
Wow.
That at the end of one chapter, you might be mourning, but you got to turn the page and keep going.
Well
And
said.
so I went in, that was on a Friday night. It was a Good Friday. He came to LA to preach. And I went in on Monday and I put in my 2-week notice. And they were like, DeVon, well, where do you have a job? I'm like, no. And they were like, well, why are you leaving? I said, well, I can't
I'm turning the page.
Right, I'm turning the page. Exactly. And I can't tell you faith works if I'm afraid to try it. And, those 2 weeks, I was really praying that God would give me a job in the 2 weeks. And and he didn't, and so I ended up leaving unemployed. And on that first day of unemployment, when I tell you I had no plan, I had no plan, none. All I knew was that the job was done at working, for Will at that point in time. I was like, okay, I've done all I can do and it's time to go. But I didn't know what was next. And by the end of the day, of that first day of unemployment, true story, I got called from another production company run by Tracy Edmonds. And she did the movie Soul Food in the series Soul Food. And at the time, she was married to Babyface. And her head of film called me and said, "DeVon, we want to offer you, a job as a junior executive in our film department. Do you want it?" And I said, "Yes." And that was the beginning of my, the executive chapter of my career.
And that executive chapter, I mean, it's the frustration of the patience it takes to kind of let life catch up to where you're supposed to be.
Right. That's right.
It's like you feel like God's put on your heart a purpose and something that you're supposed to be, but nobody else has gotten the memo yet.
That's right.
And having to have the patience and the humility and the self-worth, and then the courage to have that moment to let go of the boat and swim, be like, if I drowned, I drowned, but I'm going for it.
Yeah.
And there's just something about that, of waiting for your moment and then just saying, hey, I'm going to go for it because I know who I am, even if nobody else does.
That's right.
And that's awesome about your story. With, eventually that ascent in the executive world, ended up being a vice president at Columbia Pictures, did some amazing movies.
Long story short, it was Amy Pascal who was running Sony.
Got it.
And around that time, she convinced Will and James to move Overbrook to Sony.
And then your world kind of collided.
Yeah, that's right. So that was the irony. Like when I quit working for Will, that was it. Like I mean, it was great because even though I quit, I still had him as a mentor.
Yep.
So he, whenever I would need advice or ever I would need, clarity or understanding about the business or insight, he would always provide it. So it was ironic that when I got to Sony, they had to deal with Will. I mean, and so I had nothing to do with it. And then the greater irony was that the first movie that I worked on for Sony was Pursuit of Happiness.
Wow.
Pursuit of Happiness was, the story took place in the Bay Area. We shot in the Bay Area. We shot down the street in some scenes from where I did my high school, after school job. And Pursuit of Happiness was really what kind of launched my entree into, I would say faith-based filmmaking, so to speak, because it wasn't that we thought Pursuit of Happiness was a faith movie at all. Once we saw the first cut and I saw it,
it's a brilliant film.
Yeah, it really is, man. I mean, it's one of my all-time favorites, even having worked on it. And once I saw the first cut of the film, I was so emotional about it because I said, wow, as a person of faith, this movie is really inspiring me. It's really improving my faith. And so I said, why don't we take this message of Produced by Faith to the church? And I did not know, my title at the time was like creative executive. So in the world of film executives, creative executive, you're at the bottom. So it's like creative exec, it goes director of development, vice president, senior vice president, executive vice president, president, then chairman or chairperson. And I was the creative executive on Pursuit of Happiness. And I put together like a 40 to 45 page marketing campaign and publicity campaign on how to take the message of the film to the church community and said, okay, here's what we would need Will to do. Here are the ministers that we should get on board. And they said, okay, go do it. And so, I called up TD Jakes and, got Will to do an appearance at MegaFest that year. And then, started working on him doing these personalized greetings to all the top pastors in the top 10 to 12 markets. And then we did a faith-based trailer that I went down to the AV place and cut myself, with the audiovisual guy. So I didn't understand that, I was kind of like, just like engineering this kind of mainstream, faith approach that we all, rely upon now. And the movie was successful. That domestically, the movie made almost as much as Casino Royale that year, which is the James Bond movie.
It's incredible.
And Will attributed a lot of that to the faith campaign and the vision that I had around that movie. And that was really the foundation in the beginning of me doing what I do as an executive and then now as a filmmaker.
I just find it like so cool to it's awesome to hear kind of our history of what
Yeah.
faith film has become, because there's several of us that have had moments of impact along the way, that we all started out in proximity in some way to each other.
Yeah.
There's some of us that had a little bit of a head start and had already made the impact, and we kind of joined it. But we were all in those early days where we were trying to figure out what is this thing, this kind of faith kind of meets film kind of idea, seeing what what it's grown into, like now, like, you know for you it starts with Pursuit of Happiness. For us, kind of our moment of impact was with I Can Only Imagine. But each of us have had these moments that we've kind of have been hard fought and hard earned, where it's moved the needle a little bit, and then you've gone on to do your own stuff. um what's your kind of viewpoint on what you've seen faith film start as, and what it's become as far as a genre and audience?
Yeah, I think in terms of the origins of it, I think it's interesting. I think when you look at the films that were successful, you go back to Facing the Giants and what was the first movie they did? I mean, after that,
Fly,
the movie.
is Courageous,
No, it was before that. It was
Fireproof,
Fireproof. There we
that
go.
one.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
So you look at Fireproof. You look at Son of God. There were just some movies in those early days that had kind of taken off. The thing about those films, and there were even others that I just can't recall in the moment, but the thing about those films, even Pursuit of Happiness, is that the intent was not about a faith-based business.
Mm-hmm.
It was about telling a story that whichever filmmakers were responsible were passionate about. I mean, when you guys, did October Baby or you did Woodlawn, like it's because that's what you were passionate about.
Right.
So I think the genesis of what we now know as the modern, faith-based film genre or business, so to speak. I think the intention, also the Passion of the Christ. That's right.
Yeah. It all dates back to that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was really, one of the benchmarks of faith films, and from a Hollywood perspective, in terms of the success of what this audience and what these movies could do. My point is that once everybody saw, oh, there's a business opportunity, I think that the faith-based space became inundated with low quality content, with so many people raising funds independently and
Yep.
making movies, and no disrespect, saying, oh, well, God told me, and that's cool, but
Mhm.
if you don't know how to make a film and you're not really allowing yourself to learn, think about, and I hate to even say this, but I mean, if you look at all of the independent financing that has happened in the faith community that's been raised for content that has never seen the light of day, or if
Yep.
it did, it really didn't have the impact that was designed. I would say, it's probably hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions,
More. Yeah.
that have been raised that we say are for the kingdom, but have been given to content that just couldn't go the distance. And so I don't disparage anyone who feels like they have a word from God. I don't disparage anyone who wants to do something for the kingdom. But what I do know is that the business lost itself.
Yeah.
And I would say even a couple of years ago, being in the faith-based business as a filmmaker was not a thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I credit you all. I credit you and your brother John and your partner Kevin because of your success and you all, your deal with Lionsgate and the movies you were making. Being able to make the films you've made, and then when you look at the success of Jesus Revolution, you know, I don't know where we would be if Jesus
Mm.
Revolution hadn't happened, because I feel like Jesus Revolution was the rebirth and the restart of the faith film business, you know. And I think you guys being visionary to say we believe in this and we're not going to pivot from faith films. We're going to continue to make the films that we are passionate about, and that's the differentiating factor about you all. You're incredible business men. You make incredible deals. You make movies for a price that look amazing, yet you do it because you're passionate about the story. Never once have I dealt with you all and the business has driven the decision.
Hmm.
And I think that's where the faith-based business kind of lost its way for years. It
Yep.
felt like the business was driving the decisions, or the business of like, oh, we can make a movie for, this amount and make this, versus like, what are the stories that we're
Yep.
passionate about, and how can we tell those stories with the best quality, the best casting, the best production. And I just credit you all for really staying in it. I've been in it, but it's like I've always kind of done, the faith, adjacent. So from even Pursuit of Happiness to Miracles from Heaven and Breakthrough, it's like, those have always had faith in it, but it hasn't necessarily, I don't think, been as like hardcore in the great way as the films that you all have done.
Well, man, I appreciate that, D. I really do. I'm humbled by you saying any of that. I think that every day we just try to do our best DeVon Franklin impression, but 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 I think that what really resonates is this idea, like you're talking about. It's about passion meets authenticity,
Yes.
and so you have to have enough anger and passion to want to try to move the needle, to
Yep.
redefine, like, I'm a person of faith. I want to see myself represented in a way that is, actually what I believe, in a way that's developed as a complete human being. And then, having the authenticity to kind of articulate that, so I think that the group of us that all kind of have been in proximity to each other, I think the past couple years has been exciting because you've seen people find their voice in different ways. And so like for you, I think you dance that line back and forth between the sacred and the secular, kind of the idea of something that's very mainstream.
Yeah.
And you've done that well. You interact with mainstream talent better than anybody that I know in the producing world that is a person of faith. Like, I just think that you just know how to speak the language and stay authentically you. And I've always respected that about you. You float on a red carpet so much better than anybody in our camp. And then you got, and then you stepping out of Sony after you had so much success with films like, Hancock, and rebooting Annie, and, doing Heaven is for Real, which also moved the needle as far as mainstream
That's true.
faith. And so you stepping out and finding your voice. And then you see Dallas Jenkins, I was at NRB when we were launching Kingdom, and he was outside with this little booth kind of talking about this thing, The Chosen. And I'm like, that'll never fly. And then all of a sudden it just completely redefines the idea of doing,
Yeah.
series about faith. And then you see somebody like, Alejandro and Eduardo with Sound of Freedom, and those guys grinding it out for years. I remember seeing Bella when they made it right around when we made October Baby. I was like, these guys are so talented, and seeing them pay their dues until they have their moment in the sun with Sound of Freedom. So I think the key to it is, like you said, not going at faith as a business, but going as an authentic representation of your voice. And I think you have to authentically believe the stories that you're selling.
Yes.
And then be able to find an audience that cares, service them in a way that reaches out maybe beyond them to what we call benevolent skeptics. Those people that they're not against it, but they don't know they want it yet.
Yeah.
And for each person in this space, that might have a different shade. For you, I mean, doing a movie like Flaming Hot that you did
Yeah.
with Eva Longoria, like, incredible film.
Thank
But
you.
it has the principles of faith in there, of
Of course.
believing, and of purpose, and of finding something bigger than yourself. But you did it in such a mainstream way that it's like, that's authentically DeVon, but I believe everything in that movie.
Oh,
So
I love that, man. Thank
I
you.
think I don't know if that kind of resonates with kind of what you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, no, it resonates. It resonates strongly, and I think the through line with all of those successes that you've mentioned are authenticity and a real passion. And I just, my hope and my prayer is that we do better as a faith-based filmmaking community with this new chapter in the reinvigoration of our genre within Hollywood, that we do better this time around than the last time.
Yeah.
That we make higher quality films, that we tell stories that we really connect to, that we continue to, as we do, help each other. It's like, I mean, we talk all the time. We share information. We watch cuts of films. We read scripts. We
Yep.
share ideas. Like, that's how we, as filmmakers within this genre, continue to grow and
Yep.
continue to, help, backstop the entire quality of all of it. And so I love, yes, I think what you just said puts what I'm trying to say in perfect context, and even takes it a step further.
Well, with you, taking that step out of, you've been a successful executive at Sony and decided to kind of, hey, I'm ready to kind of put my stamp on my kind of films. And you step out with Miracles from Heaven. And I think one of the things that you did that was a game changer, was you were the first one to really say, I can authentically represent my voice of faith, but I'm going to go after mainstream talent. And I'm going to make a mainstream movie. And so when you went and recruited Jennifer Garner and Queen Latifah and, a really stellar cast, um, and then I'm just curious, like how because we followed your playbook for years on how you've interacted with talent and given them a chance to really connect with a story that is faith, and kind of taking it from being scary or considered in a certain light, and giving them a way to speak to it. And I watched what you did with Jennifer Garner
Hmm.
on Miracles, and it was just a masterclass and how allowing her to find her voice and not apologize for the movie that she was doing, but be proud of it and represent it in a way that was her. How did you figure out how to have that conversation, and how did you position that in a way that was able to check both boxes?
Yeah, it was divine timing. Once I had the script, I knew that, okay, we need somebody who has some crossover appeal and also the ability to be the anchor of that film. Because at the end of the day, that film is a love letter to mothers. I mean,
Yep.
it's a mother who is fighting for her daughter, and fighting vigorously for her daughter and vehemently for the healing of her daughter. And as we were talking about who could do it, the name Jennifer Garner came up, and I was like, oh yeah. I said she would be perfect, because at that time, she was still well known enough, but like in terms of her film career and her TV, acting career, she wasn't, she probably even say this. Like, I think when you go back and you look at where she was at Miracles from Heaven and where she is now,
Yeah.
I think Miracles from Heaven and the success of it just restarted her acting career in a way that, she just has exploded since then. So we caught her at the right moment where she wanted to do something. She is a person of faith. She had not explored that in a film. She's a mother. And so when she read the script, she connected to it. And it just so happened at that point in time, she was going through a very the difficult divorce that she was going through with Ben. And so the movie really became a beacon of hope for her personally. And so it was really just divine timing of the script coming in at the time when she was open to it, and she read it, she fell in love with it, and that allowed us to get Queen Latifah, and then that allowed us to get Eugenio Derbez, and next thing you know, the movie is was the success that it was. But it was all just thinking about, okay, what's the best way to put this movie together, and then also who's going to be the ambassador that
Hmm.
can speak also to the faith community and the mainstream community. And I'm always thinking that way, from a talent standpoint, like, okay, who can do the grassroots, who's willing to do the grassroots,
Hmm.
because that takes time, effort, and energy, and a willingness. And then also who can get booked on mainstream television shows, who can
Hmm.
get booked in mainstream media, who can get booked on covers. And so I'm always kind of looking at the combination of that, and then whoever fits in the middle. And if they're right for the part, that's who I tend to go after.
It definitely changed the playing field, because I think, you know, the idea of getting the church to embrace mainstream talent and to do stories that are mainstream relatable, and to find the talent, that the amount of talent that's out there that are people of faith, and they do have a deep faith, but they've never, they've never done anything that had faith kind of adjacent to it, and to kind of coax them in and allow the audience to accept them. I think Miracles from Heaven was like a game changing moment, for how faith is represented, and it's what we've been striving to do, what we've gone on to do with Dennis Quaid and Zachary
Yeah.
Levi, and and KJ Appa and different talent like that, and then Kelsey on Jesus Revolution,
Yep.
what my brother and Brent were able to do with him, and him having a very spiritually changing moment for himself personally, and to go on national TV and talk about that in tears. I mean, that does wonders for
Oh
your
my
film
goodness.
of
Yeah.
legitimizing
Oh boy.
the audience.
You got that right.
So I think it started, but I remember for me, it was watching Jen on the Tonight Show, and
Yeah.
I watched her, and she told her story about how her daughters had coaxed her back into the church,
Yeah.
and she shared that story on the Tonight Show, and I was like, this is a game changing, defining moment, and
Yeah.
if Jen Garner can do that and not have an ounce of shame, like, it was a very legitimizing moment, I think, for the Christian audience,
Agreed.
that I attribute to kind of the vision that you had,
Oh,
for you, with that idea of being an actor, you know, uh, I've it's been cool to see your career evolve, and you've always been a producer and been behind the scenes as a leader, but to see you kind of find a love of acting, that's something that is really growing. And I remember on Woodlawn when we were casting it, and I was just like, it was my brother's idea actually, and we were casting the pastor for Tony's pastor in the film, and John was just like, I have a hunch that DeVon Franklin can act and wants to act. And he's like, and I was like, man, he's a good looking dude. Like,
oh man.
I bet you he can. And so, to see like that develop with Jesus Revolution, now you're doing a lot
Yeah.
of it. Like, talk to me about like this new passion you have for acting.
Man, listen, I give you all credit. My entire, burgeoning acting career, it has everything to do with you all being seeing the vision, giving me the opportunities that have jump started me into this new, vertical. And so I remember when you guys called me for Woodlawn, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I said, well, let me read the script. And oh, it's he's playing a preacher. Oh, I could play that. I could do that. And I felt like, all right, cool. And I when I did it, I enjoyed it. Then once you all called me for Jesus Revolution, that was a little bit more. I was about to tell. I think it was Kevin that may have called me at the time. I was about to tell him, well, because when he told me what the part was, and he told me, like the part in Jesus Revolution was much, there was dialogue and it was more involved than the part in Woodlawn, because the part in Woodlawn felt like, okay, I'm playing more a version of myself that's just a
Yeah, take me
pure
to
version.
church. Yeah.
Cool, yeah, I can take you to church. Cool, but Jesus Revolution was a real, part in this guy and this reporter and what he's trying to do, and he also kind of is the instigator of this whole story, almost the
Mhm.
device for the story.
Yeah.
So because of all that, my initial instinct was I was going to say, well, you guys, like now, okay, for real, like I'm not an actor.
Mhm.
But I didn't say that because I felt like God was saying, why would you speak against something that I might be speaking for?
Wow.
Yes. So I said, okay, you know what? Let me read the script. I read the script. I liked it. I said, okay, cool. You guys, I said, let's, make the offer. And, you all made the offer. And then I took it seriously. Like, because I've been
Mhm.
around acting since, since I was 18, interning for Will. And then I was married to, an actress for 10 years. And so I knew the preparation and the reading of the scripts and breaking down the scripts and learning the lines. I knew all of that. So when it came to, doing Jesus Revolution, it was like, oh, wow. I actually, even though I haven't done it, I know what to do. I
Got a muscle
know.
memory. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just applied it to me learning this part. And so doing it and then getting the set. And one story that I don't think I've even shared which was very interesting, which is I was working with my acting coach, and that character that I play in Jesus Revolution doesn't have a bio per se,
Mhm.
right? You don't quite know. He's from New York, and he talks about at some point in the movie the types of stories he's covered, but you don't really know his story. So my acting coach was like, listen, you need to write his character bio. So I just wrote a character bio and just things that I was connecting to and why I got to where I am and what I'm doing and all that kind of stuff. So I had prepared the script that I was sent prior to production. And I get to set and I start shooting. And then there's one day that I'm there and something says, and then this is the day that I was getting ready to shoot, my biggest scene in the movie. And something says, look at the sides that they just put in your trailer. So I look at the sides and the scene has changed. It was a dialogue, but then it really became much more of a monologue. And the irony is that some of the very things that I wrote in the character bio were the things that were in the dialogue in the script.
No.
Yes. And I never had a conversation with Brent. I never had a conversation with John. Never had a
Wow.
conversation with John Gunn. Never. It was just, when I read the new pages, I said, whoa, I said, okay, I can actually do this and I can make this adjustment and relearn this scene because this is how I've already prepared. So that was a
Man.
sign, for me that God is with me. And then once I did that scene with Joel Courtney and Kelsey, I just felt like, oh, okay. And what was also funny was, as I'm doing the scenes and I'm there and, all that, some people don't know who I am. They don't know anything about my producing or whatever. And there were so many people that would come up to me and say, wow, you're really great. How long have you been acting? You're a great actor. And I was just laughing on the inside, because I just say, well, I'm just getting started, cool. And then so doing that, led to another film that I did for BET. And that led to another film I'm getting ready to shoot that Sean McNamara, who did Soul Surfer, is directing. And that's called On Fire. And it's the biggest role that I've done to date. And
That's awesome.
it's the incredible story of John O'Leary, who was a man who was burned at 9 years old, 100% of his body. And, and there was a nurse that was instrumental in his miraculous recovery. And I get a chance to play that nurse. So, long answer to your question, it's just been amazing to see this unfolding. And for me, I don't ever want to be married to an idea of who I am that blocks the revelation of who I really am. Because so often we're like, we've had success in one area and we're like, okay, that's who I am. Well, maybe you're more than that.
Man.
But if we don't embrace the more, we never become the more. So when you guys came to me and said, hey, do you want to be in Jesus Revolution? I said, okay, let me embrace that. And now you see God starting to unfold this whole new dynamic to my career. And what I love about it is there's something different. The impact that I can have on people is different being in front of that camera. There's something about it. And so to have the ability to produce films and then now act in films, it blows my mind that God is using all of that for the kingdom in his way.
The exciting thing to see something so unexpected develop.
Yeah.
And because I remember I sat down with you for breakfast a little while back out in LA, and we're sitting down and we share ideas from time to time. And I was like, man, what are you really passionate about right now? And then you got this twinkle in your eye that I've never seen before. Like and you're just like, acting. And I'm like, you're like, I got to be honest, I am excited about acting.
Oh, yeah.
And that just, it's been exciting to see what God's developing there. And I think the other cool thing is, relationships that in this business that are real relationships, they go both ways.
Yes,
And so I could list out what you've listed out and more of things you've done to impact my career, projects that you've given up for yourself and brought to us and said, hey, this is your voice.
Yeah.
And doing it in a way that's unselfish, sharing information behind the scenes so that, we each get the best opportunities in our career, helping perfect and tweak ideas that we have to make sure it's right. And it's like this cyclical nature of, being able, you never know, when a snotty-nosed kid sitting on the other side of your desk, at an office at some
Yeah.
point will be an ally. And and so because you shared your wisdom in a way that wasn't dismissive when I had nothing really to show for it, just to see how that plays out over, a 15-year period of time, has been, it's a God thing. And so I'm excited.
Totally God thing.
And
Well,
I'm excited.
one thing on that, Andy, there's a scripture that says, "Do not despise the day of small beginnings."
Mm.
And there's also a scripture that says, "You were faithful over a few things; I'll make you ruler over many." And when you're sharing that, it just made me think about where I was at Sony, and then when we first met. And I think sometimes there's a temptation to say, like, to look at someone and say, "Oh, well, you don't have anything to offer me, so I'm not going to engage with you." But in the kingdom, that's not how we can operate.
Right.
We're being called to be open, to be partners when we can, to listen. Because again, you never have any idea who you're talking to, right? You don't know what seed that person is and what they're going to grow into. And that's not the reason to be open to help. But it's amazing to me that, to your point, that the moment that we all met, having no idea what God would do over the course of 15 years, it's amazing.
I do want to communicate that, at Kingdom, we're fans of DeVon Franklin. Like, you've been a loyal friend, behind the scenes every bit as much as out in front of the cameras. And so, you are a man of integrity, in an industry that doesn't have a lot of men of integrity. You've been consistent and you've walked the path. You've had that integrity in the way that you've carried yourself, the way that you treat people, and the way that you represent what you believe. And I, every day we do find a lot of inspiration in the journey that you've had.
Thank you.
So
Thank you, my
grateful
brother.
for that. And I'm grateful that it's just getting started.
Yeah.
Just as far as kind of tracing it back to the beginning, just you mentioned several films that made an early impact on you. What's the first one that you can remember? Like, I remember Steven Spielberg talking about when he watched The Greatest Show on Earth, and he watched it and he was like, that's what I want to do. And then he watched Lawrence of Arabia and it almost made him quit because he's like, I'm never going to be able to do something like that.
Right.
So for you, early memories, what was the first film that like grabbed you and it's like kind of sucked you in?
I would say Back to the Future.
Huh.
That movie, I was just in awe of the creativity and at the time, the visual effects and the storytelling. Like, I mean, even to this day, I can sit and watch Back to the Future. And the other film that I remember was Rocky 3. Rocky 3. I
That's
mean,
a great one.
yeah, I was super young. I didn't watch Rocky 1 and 2 until I was a little bit older, but Rocky
Right.
3 and Rocky 4, I actually went to the theater to see. And, I just felt so connected to Rocky. I'm the middle child of three boys, and I always have felt like an underdog in life and, within my family and at school and all that. So seeing Rocky 3 and, Apollo Creed and Clubber Lane and all that, I was like, man, I have to be a part of this business. All these movies are inspiring me, and I just love the movie making process. And it's amazing that you can just take something off the page and then it comes to life. And those were two movies that really captured my imagination.
For you, is there a piece of advice that you got from somebody else that you've like carried as like kind of a core thing that you do?
My Aunt Donna growing up would always say, never burn a bridge because you never know when you have to cross it again. And as I've navigated entertainment and even been in difficult situations with difficult people, what I also learned as kind of an addendum to that is people don't remember how you started. They only remember how you finished.
Well said.
And so for me, even when I've had to leave difficult situations or situations didn't work out, I've always ended well. I've always kept the bridge intact. And that has served me extremely well in my career. Opportunities that have presented themselves, relationships where, in one season it didn't bear fruit, but, in another season it did. By not burning bridges and by ending well, that has been, that advice is something that I have carried with me from that day to this. And I would highly recommend anyone listening to this or watching this would take that to heart. End well. It's not about how you start. Anybody can have a fast start, but do you have a quality finish?
Well said. I mean, I can attest to that because, like, even this business, just conflict is part of the thing, and even when inadvertently I've stepped on your toes, or there's been things that have happened, you've always come directly to me and be like, hey bro, let's work this out. And you've
Yeah.
always just done it with class instead of just throwing away the relationship. You've always been like, let's work through it.
Yeah.
And that's part of your integrity. I love it. Well,
Thank
DeVon,
you.
I'm excited to consider you a storyteller that I admire, and it's just a treat to have you on the show to kind of talk through your journey. It's an inspiration, bro.
Thank you, man. Likewise, my brother. You're an inspiration. I'm glad you're doing this. I cannot wait to watch the other episodes. This is phenomenal, man. And it's always good talking with you and seeing you.
All right, dude. We appreciate you. We'll talk soon.
All right, brother.
I think one of the things that DeVon talked about that really spoke to me is the idea of never burning a bridge and it being about relationships in the business. And to see many times in his career where he could have burned the bridge and he could have reacted to the hand that he was dealt. Whether it was when he had to kind of restart and find a new job and he had to leave that job, or when he decided to leave being behind the desk as an executive and become a producer. Each step along the way, as he's taken a new chapter and kind of defined something new about what he wants to chase, he's never done it at the expense of his relationships. And to kind of consider that you never know when you're going to need that relationship again. And I think for me, as a creative, as a film guy, it's so easy in this business to get your feelings hurt and to kind of react and to just say, I'll show you, and to kind of burn the bridge on the way out and be like, I'll never talk to you again. I'll see you when I'm big time. And every time you do that, it's going to hurt you, either reputationally, or you never know when you're going to need that person again. So there's several people that I've always said, like, I'd never work with them again, that I've gone back and I've worked with them multiple times because I needed it. And there was something that the opportunity presented that we had to work together again. And so being able to resolve those conflicts rather than react to those conflicts, and to treasure the relational equity that you have built up as something that you never want to squander, you never want to take for granted. And if you can take one piece of advice from that interview, take this: it's a relational business, and value your relationships because it will benefit you. And DeVon's a guy that his career attests to that. So that's the show today. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of The Storytellers.
The Storytellers is a Kingdom Story Company production. It is produced by Nick Carey with production assistance from Ben and Justin Bailey. Our executive producers are Kevin Downs and Brandon Gregory. Social media for the show is run by the team at Troops and Allies, and our music is Twisted Rooster by Tommy Profit. Special thanks to Jaron Weatherly, Evan Johnston, and our entire team at Kingdom Story Company. We have so many exciting guests coming up this season. To ensure you don't miss any of them, subscribe to The Storytellers for free on YouTube at Kingdom Story Company or wherever you listen to podcasts. For exclusive first looks at our upcoming films, behind-the-scenes content, and invitations to advanced screenings, join the conversation as a Kingdom Insider at kingdomstorycompany.com and follow us at Kingdom Story Company across all platforms. As always, thanks for joining Andrew Erwin and his friends on The Storytellers.